Start.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us again. I'm joined by Jeff Berkowitz, and he is coming to us from Chicago. And Jeff and I are going to be talking about some of the big stories that are happening today, as well as what happened last week. And last time we were with you, Jeff, or with the audience, we were looking forward at the Virginia elections, and now we know what the results are. But before we begin that, I want to surprise Jeff here. Jeff, have you heard of the story that the president wants to spend $450,000 on the illegal immigrants? Have you heard of that story?
Yeah, Terry, he said that was garbage. He told Fox that was garbage. Now I hear he's recanting.
And then what happened?
He's
and that
recanting.
his press secretary, his
Yes.
deputy press secretary went on and said, no, the president not only supports it, he's okay with it. But Jeff,
Jean-Pierre
Jeff,
said
hang
that.
on. Yeah, John. And I want to say this, folks, is why you want to watch Jeff and I, among other reasons. Because, Jeff, if the people haven't heard that, here's why they haven't heard that. The media coverage of the payments to undocumented immigrants. And it had not 1 minute of coverage on any of the news shows. But here's what they do want us to watch, Jeff. And I got this earlier today from ABC News, that Greta Thunberg is going to have a climate strike march in Glasgow. So that we should pay attention to. But the idea that the president wants to give $450,000 per person to these illegal immigrants coming into the country, that we're not supposed to know anything about according to the mainstream media.
Look,
So,
as Jean-Pierre said, if we can save money, so Terry, it may not be 450,000 per person or $1 million per family or 2 million. It may be only 900,000, maybe a little less. So that's why it's garbage. Because Peter Lucy on Fox
Ducey,
News
Peter
said,
Ducey.
Peter Ducey said 450,000. So if it's 425, this is another garbage report, according to the President of the United States. So if Trump had said that, oh my gosh, he's a big lie.
He's a liar.
But if Biden said that, oh, it's just a little gaffe, he was just correcting it. Oh my gosh, why are you folks making such a big deal?
And look, I'm not even holding who I'm holding responsible here is the news media. And it just, this again, as I'm saying, people think, well, how come you and Jeff can't get a job with a legitimate news organization? And I'm saying, well, you know what? When the media doesn't want to give you any kind of coverage of the issue that the president and his administration want to spend $450,000 to pay people who came into the country illegally. Now, maybe there's an argument for it, but you wouldn't know that from the networks, would you? Now,
Well, and better yet, Terry, so what we're advising, not only do you need to watch Terry and Jeff, but you also have to start, if you're a liberal and you want to
quit
find
watching
out
the
what's
network
going,
news.
quit watching the CNN and MSNBC network news and turn over to Fox. Because if you were watching CNN on election eve, as the numbers came in, do you know what John King and Jake Tapper, who are really the best of the people at CNN, the two people I admired most at CNN, so this is the best, they would tell you, Terry, that they didn't mention it all at 10 p.m. when it was clear that Youngkin's winning and he would win and they still hadn't called it. They would tell you, John King and Jake Tapper, watch the tape, 10 to 11 Central Standard
Get to the
Time,
point.
an hour. Terry, it was not the cultural issue. It was not that education was an issue. It wasn't that rape was being covered up. It wasn't that wokeness was being taught. And so, no, it was all a matter of COVID not being fixed completely by President Joe Biden. And that's what elected Youngkin. It was complete balderdash. I was never so disappointed because I respect Tapper, I respect King. King used to be known as the Republican at CNN.
Well,
So why didn't they say this?
Why didn't they say it?
Anything about the culture?
Because they
Why?
work at CNN and they're told, and they want to keep getting a paycheck from CNN, and they know
So you
what's
have to-
so you got to act stupid even when you're not.
It's not the party line.
It's not the
to
party
say
line.
that there was a cultural issue. So let's go to Illinois.
No,
Illinois.
not yet. Let's not.
No?
Let's go
Not
to
yet? Okay.
this morning. We got national news because we're keeping the people informed. Here's a jobs report, Jeff. The October jobs report, which just came out this morning as we tape this on the November 5, that non-farm payrolls had 531,000 jobs created. And for those who don't follow the jobs report, a normal month would be in the area of 200,000 jobs. So to have 531,000 jobs created in the month is a very good number. Unemployment rate fell to 4.6%. Average hourly earnings were up year over year 4.9%. So those are good numbers. And Jeff, the thing I would say is that at the same time as we are taping this, we have the House of Representatives in Washington, rarely on a Friday morning, because Nancy Pelosi is trying to put out a stimulus. Now, explain to me, Jeff, because you're like a PhD in economics and all about whatever your thesis. But the point is, why do we need a stimulus if the economy is creating 531,000 jobs? And when what we have to be concerned with is not unemployment, but inflation. And while we had...
The economy does not need a stimulus, and that's not the answer. The Democratic Party made a promise. If you put them in power, to their progressive wing, we're going to give you everything you could want, and it's going to be free. Free, okay? So they made that promise, Terry, and Bernie Sanders will tell you, really, it should be a $6 trillion package. That's what he wanted originally. He cut it to $3.5 trillion. Bare bones, Terry, bare bones, $3.5 trillion, larger than anything we've ever seen. That's not counting the $1.2 billion in infrastructure, which we're about to pass. That's not counting.
Well, I don't think they are going to pass it. Now,
well,
the House might
let me just
pass.
finish, Terry.
Go ahead.
Let me.
All right.
Bernie promised this, okay? Even though Bernie's not president, Biden is, it's the Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden presidency. And he's going to deliver. The Democrats are going to deliver. Pelosi said she got it. She got it. They did poorly on November 2, not because people didn't like where they were going and becoming too extreme. No. They hadn't delivered and given people their $3.5 trillion, their $1.7 trillion, and by golly, Terry, she's going to cram it down your throat whether you want it or not, because that's what's going to save the Democratic Party in the midterms. More of the same. It is possibly the stupidest argument I've ever heard. And you're not going to hear that at CNN. You're not going to hear it at MSNBC. You might hear it at Fox.
Well, one thing I'm going to say is, now think about this. Let's talk just for a second about the politics of this. Nancy Pelosi is forcing her members to vote on this bill in the wake of the Virginia election that we'll get to in a second. But in the wake of this bill that was a repudiation of so much that's going on, they're doubling down. And not only is she forcing her members to take a vote on this, she's doing it in the full knowledge that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are not going to support this in the Senate, and that it is a meaningless vote in terms of passing the legislation. And this is the craziest thing. I mean, this is like the kamikaze House Democratic caucus.
Do you think Nancy Pelosi, is she pushing 80 now? Is she now
she's past the 80 number.
So is she now as senile as Biden? Do we have two senile leaders of the country, Pelosi and Biden, who are now past their point of dementia? Seriously.
It might be, but let me bring up something else. If you're for the little guy, as the Democrats have long said they are, So we
Yeah.
had just said, what is the concern here? It's not job creation, it's inflation, right? Gas
Right.
prices, everyone else knows, are up. Gas is a component of every single thing because it goes into the cost of delivery, as well as the cost of manufacturing. So, Jeff, let's take a look at inflation versus wages. Well, average hourly wages are up 4.9%, but look at inflation. The CPI is up 5.4%, which means that the average Joe is now falling behind. And so that is
Real
the
wages,
concern.
as economists like to say, hourly wages deflated by the inflation rate mean that real wages are going down, not up. That arrow, we should have a big statement, a big phrase that says real wages and the arrow pointing down. Because if inflation exceeds
Yeah,
the
these are
hourly wage
the
increase,
point is inflation is growing faster than, I mean, when you have almost 5% hourly wage increase, that's a good thing. But because of the recent inflation, and this goes to folks, I know a lot of people, this is talk about coverage they're not going to get somewhere else. This is the kind of thing that, the normal news divisions hold up a cross when you start to talk about economic stories. But the fact of the matter is, this is why it's not just, I'm not being partisan, but if you have an inkling of how the economy works, when you have inflation going, it's like a fire. And if you're going to pass a stimulus and spend trillions of dollars more, that's like throwing gas on the fire. You
okay,
want to
Terry,
put the fire out.
let's give people some value add. Let's bring it home to Illinois now, okay? I mean, Ted Dabrowski, you interviewed people, should go see that. The big driving message of your interview with Ted Dabrowski is it's policy, folks, it's policy. And so
Well, in talking about Virginia, I interviewed Ted.
In Virginia, in Virginia, it
We
was
talked about Ted,
policy.
and we said, what were the lessons from the Youngkin, the Republican Youngkin winning the governorship, and what does it mean for Illinois? And I think he had a good answer. That kind of also fits in with why people were not happy with Donald Trump. It wasn't the policies, it was Trump's approach and his meanness. Personality.
Right.
So let's listen to what Ted said, Ted Dabrowski said with Wirepoints was the lesson for Illinois Republicans.
I think the lesson here for Illinois is people love to beat up on Madigan, they love to beat up on Pritzker. Republicans certainly do. What I would argue is that they should hit the failed policies of Madigan and Pritzker. That's what's wrong with Illinois. The people are people, but their policies are what need to be argued, and I think that's the way you win the arguments.
Okay, so it's policy. And what does that mean for Illinois if you're running for governor, if you're Gary Rabine, if you're Jesse Sullivan, if you're Darren Bailey, Paul Schimm? Policy. Because Ted Dabrowski is not doing politics at the moment, he's doing policy. Excuse me, as he emphasized to you, Terry, it's not that things are staying the same in Illinois. They're getting worse. The $400 billion shortfall, as the Wirepoints will be coming out with soon, is going toward $500 billion. Education is worse. At CPS, we're looking at 11th graders, only 14% of 11th graders who are African American read at grade level. For Hispanics, it's a little higher, 25%. What are the Democrats talking about in CPS? Oh, they're saying we have high graduation rates. What does it matter if people graduate, but they can't read or do math at grade level? Nobody's talking about that. Come on, guys and ladies. If you're running on the Republican side, let's give them some data. Like Chicago, you should be wooing that vote. You should be wooing the black vote. I mean, I think blacks are like anybody else. They care about the quality of their education. And if they're failing in CPS, give them school choice, give them vouchers, give them charters, give them some means of trying something else, right? And, if you're talking about the economy in Illinois, you're talking about the unemployment rate went down in the US, but what is it in Illinois? When I last looked, it was hovering in the 7% range. We are usually 1 or 2 points higher than the national unemployment rate. Why the hell aren't the GOP gov candidates talking about that? Give them some data. Crime. Why don't they give them the data? Tell them, don't just say high crime. Come on, Jesse Sullivan. See the ad this morning. Oh, it's high crime. It's public corruption. It's high taxes. Let's give them the data. Let's show them you know it. Okay, I'm just picking on Jesse because I saw his ad, but I could say the same, I'm sure, about Gary Rabine. Okay, give him the data. Same about Darren Bailey. Same about Paul Schimpf. Oh, and they differ a little bit on pensions, but let's tell them what your views are. Do you want to attack the long-term solution, long-term problems of Illinois? Well, what are the solutions? I mean, here's Wirepoints. They're holding this resource out there for anybody. They'll talk to JB Pritzker. JB, you want to sit down and find out from Wirepoints what you could do better to attack the economic problems of Illinois? Yeah, let's talk to Ted Dabrowski. He'll do it. You think he's going to say, oh, what you need to do is go over to Glasgow and talk about how you got the greenest, best climate change policy? Really? So you're going to convert, you're going to fix Rockford. Really? You're going to fix Rockford by taking that Chrysler plant?
I think knowing Rockford in the wintertime, they would, Rockford would probably welcome some global warming in the wintertime.
I mean, so here's the point. I'll get off my hobby horse here and say, look, folks, give them the data, because the data are on your side. The policies are on your side. The first thing that
Jeff, let me. I interviewed, as I said, we interviewed.
The first thing, Terry. The first thing that Youngkin said in his victory speech, he wants school choice. He was not afraid to go out there. Oh, what do they say in Illinois? We can't talk about school choice. Some people are critical. Teachers unions won't give me money. Guess what, folks? If you're a Republican, you're not getting enough money from the teachers unions to matter. So just go out there and look for the vote. Look for this groundswell of
Okay,
support.
we got it, and that's a thing. And so, speaking of lessons from Virginia, I interviewed Jeanne Ives, and she said, you know, basically that the people are seeing, as they look at the Democratic states, like Illinois, like New York, like California, and she looks at the overreach, the heavy hand of government from the Democratic governors, that's also what they are turning against.
I think people are politically getting far more aware, and they're waking up to it. I think it's because they just do see the overreach of Democrat governors and the Democrat Biden administration. I think that they understand that he completely destroyed any sense that we have a border anymore in this state. I don't think they like the idea that 2 million illegal immigrants are going to now be residing in the state at taxpayer expense, because that is exactly what's happening. I think that they are very concerned about rising taxes again, massive amounts of inflation, and all these giveaways. They read and hear enough to understand. And then on top of it, the vaccine mandates and everything else. They know, they're waking up. They're smart enough to figure it out.
Okay, there it is. Jeannie saying, look, we thought this economy in Illinois was going to start coming back in August of 2020. Okay, we didn't have the vaccines yet, but we certainly had flattened the curve. This governor, he doesn't want to flatten the curve. He wants to flatten Illinois. I mean, what's he talking about now, Terry? You know, our hospitalizations when we had a max were up at 6,000, okay? 6,000. You know what they're at now? 1,200. And he says, oh, yes, they've come down, but they've plateaued. No, they haven't plateaued. They went from 2,000 to 1,200. It wasn't as steep of decline as it went up, but it's not plateaued. There's no problem with hospital space. There's no problem with ICUs. What the hell are you talking about? And why aren't the GOP governor candidates saying that? What does it take to get these folks energized? Go to the numbers. Go to the data. Again, Wirepoints puts it out there for you. I mean, the governor's worried about what's going on with hospitalizations and in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. Give me a break. The labor force participation rate is low nationally, and it's low in Illinois. We need to get people back to work. We need to get people back to school. We need to make sure they don't need to be masked. Only something like 27 people have died from COVID in Illinois under 20. They're not getting sick. They're not getting seriously sick. We don't even know yet. There's no demonstration that people under 20 need to be concerned, and we're vaccinating them all. Does that make any sense? Look, I'm all for vaccine when we're still having 76% of the people who die since July are still over 60. So let's concentrate on the nursing homes, which the governor didn't do. So we had half of our deaths from COVID from the nursing homes. Let's concentrate on the elderly. Let's concentrate on the people with pre-existing conditions. And let's not worry about the kids. Let's unmask them. Let's liberate them. All these psychological problems we're having with kids because they're masked, they can't adjust, they like to absorb and see people with facial expressions. Really, that's what you folks need to be talking about if you're running in the Republican primary for governor. Let's take it to them, okay? I mean, data and policy, long-term solutions, economic solutions. Let's talk about Illinois. I don't want to hear the national unemployment rate. I want to hear, which is true, is that the Illinois unemployment rate is higher. Why do we accept that? Are we an inferior state? Are we somehow economically unattractive? Do we have to send our governor to Glasgow? That's where he's going to find the jobs to bring here? It's a very limited view to say, let's deal with climate change and become greener. I mean, is that really what Illinois is about?
Well, it's anyone knows who follows Illinois politics knows that Chicago is the 800-pound gorilla that controls the political stage in Illinois. And speaking of Ted Dabrowski, I asked him, when is it going to happen? When are we going to have a red revolution in Illinois? Here's his answer.
And I think the lesson here for Illinois is, people love to beat up on Madigan. They love to beat up on Pritzker. Republicans certainly do. What I would argue is that they should hit the failed policies of Madigan and Pritzker. That's what's wrong with Illinois. The people are people, but their policies are what need to be argued, and I think that's the way you win the arguments.
So the problem with Illinois is not Chicago is the engine of growth, economic growth. It should be. But what you have is the fiscal drag from Chicago's government. We're increasing spending in the city. Look, the state and cities and counties in Illinois are the beneficiary altogether, stimulus and everything else, of about $180 billion flowing into Illinois to start spending in the last year or two and continue going forward. That's going to dry up. So what have we done in Illinois? We've boosted spending of government. So city government's gone up like 60%, Cook County government 40%, state government is going up as well. And in a year or two, that money's going to dry up. And then what are we going to do? So government is not the answer. And all that spending is crowding out free enterprise, crowding out the private sector. We need to allow the private sector to come back. We need to encourage it. We need to start talking about cutting taxes. We need to address the pension problem. Somebody's not going to want to come to Illinois if they see a $500 billion liability, cities and states that they have to take care of.
And the tax of property tax.
And the property taxes keeps going up, but property values keep going down. Again, look at the data, make the argument concrete, force the governor to address these arguments. You want to do Glasgow, do Glasgow. But I think
and that is your point, just to make it more succinct. You have 4 or 5 gubernatorial candidates, and I don't personally hear their message getting through. Folks, you're running for governor, listen to what Jeff is saying. Listen to what Glenn Youngkin did in Virginia. It's the issues. There are issues that will boil the blood of the voters, but you got to tap into that. You can't be namby-pamby. Also, Jeff, there's going to be a tax increase if they ever pass this stimulus bill here in the House. Biden is always telling us the rich need to pay their fair share. Well, let's remind the people that the top 1% of income earners already pay 40% of all the income taxes, and the top 5% pay over 60%. So what is going on here? And when you take money away from the private sector, it's not like you're screwing the rich, which is, I think, how a lot of these people view this. It's that you are taking money away from the most productive part of the economy and putting it to the least productive part of the economy.
And Pelosi and Biden are bringing back the SALT, the state and local tax deduction, the main beneficiary would be people in the top 20%, will be the millionaires. So and they're going to crowd out and remove the tax cuts of 2017, which went across the board, including low-income individuals. So this is a big tax benefit for the wealthy that Pelosi and Biden are giving them. And why aren't the media covering that? So Governor Pritzker thinks what we need to do is to subsidize electric vehicles. So is he helping low-income people? What does he do? He has a subsidy, $4,000 per vehicle, that would go to people who are buying a Tesla electric vehicle. That's a $100,000 car. He wants to subsidize the low-income people who are buying $100,000 cars. I don't think so. And aren't they getting already a subsidy from the federal government? Look, he needs to focus on low-income people who are having problems getting their kids educated. We're having problems dealing with inflation. We're having problems dealing with COVID.
Jeff, we were just before talking about the stimulus. Let me insert here very briefly. This is a live shot now of the U.S. House. They had a hard time even getting the vote not to adjourn this morning. The fact that now we are halfway through the day, it's over past 12 o'clock in D.C., and they haven't moved this bill to the floor that Nancy Pelosi is trying to pass, that stimulus, goes to show that they, at this point, don't have the votes. So we'll keep monitoring that, but that's where that stands for now.
So the latest on politics, we can close with what's going on. Adam Kinzinger is looking at, he doesn't have a prospect to run for re-election in his congressional district, has announced to CNN that he's going to be running, or he's looking at running either in the governor's slot or running at the U.S. Senate race on the GOP side. So there's that. So Kinzinger may be coming into the governor's race. We talked about the 4 current candidates. Also, Rodney Davis is looking at this. If Ken Griffin would pony up $100 million, he'd probably do it, even though he's now put in a safe seat. So, folks, if you're one of the 4 governor candidates, you better get going, because you're going to have some competition, it looks like, perhaps from Kinzinger, perhaps from Rodney Davis, perhaps from some others. And also, for the GOP, take a look at the redistricting, because even Rich Miller, a liberal, is saying there may be some good opportunities for Republicans for pickups. In the 6th congressional district, where we're going to have a Democrat progressive against progressive, Sean Casten and Marie Newman, maybe a Republican could come back to the 6th. Maybe in the 10th, where Republicans held it for a long time.
Here's the 6th that we have now from that.
All of these seats, virtually, except for Raja Krishnamurthy up there, is open, and especially the 17th with Esther Joy King. So it's possible, maybe this would be dreaming for Republicans, but they could be looking at taking over and having a 10-7 majority of 10 Republican congressional seats to 7 for Democrats. So don't write them all off. Even get a good Hispanic candidate in that new majority-minority district, the 3rd congressional district.
Hang on one second, and let me bring that up, and so the people can see it.
Right. So I'll throw in the 3rd as well. Get a good Hispanic candidate who's pro-life, who cares about education, school choice, who's willing to talk about how the public schools are failing Hispanics, failing blacks, and they need to be getting their kids able to read, write, and do math so they can go earn a good living. That's the message, right?
All right, Jeff, I think we covered a lot today. And folks, as always, we want to know what you think. So leave us a message on youtube.com. If you're watching on television, thanks for watching, Jeff. We'll keep our eye on what's going on, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
And on a cheery note, we're looking toward Thanksgiving.
That's right.